All right, I think we'll do the Tiltons next, just because, well, we've done the Applegates, we played around with the Cooks. I guess we could look at the Castlers a little bit first. We're going to do the Tiltons, but I'm Gary William Applegate. My father was William C. Applegate. His father was William C. Applegate. His mother was Mary Castler. Well, these were Jackson people. They were Pineys. They they were farmers, truck farmers, scratch farmers, and her father was Jacob Conover Castler. Jacob fought in the Civil War. His father was Thomas Castler. 1797 he was born. His father was Joseph Castler. His father was George Castler. I believe George Castler fought in the American Revolution. And his father was Peter Kessler. He was Dutch. And the Dutch was still coming to New Amsterdam. I haven't been able to track Peter Kessler any farther, the Castlers any farther back than that. There are a lot of Castlers doing family trees. You'd think we'd be able to find more about them, but we can't. Jacob Castler, who was Amos's, Mary Castler was my grandmother's mother-in-law, and she called her Mrs. Applegate. Mary Castler was married to Amos Applegate. Till she died, she called her Mrs. Applegate. So she must have been quite a scary woman. Her mother was Mary Jane Anderson, and all you people know that I have a connection with the Andersons. These are Ocean County Andersons, and they very well could be related to Dave, although I'm not doing Dave's family, so I can't tell you where, but Mary Jane Anderson's father was Aaron Anderson, Matthias Anderson, John Anderson, Kenneth Anderson, Captain John Anderson. He was a judge. John Anderson, and their father was the Lord Provost of Glasgow, sort of mayor of Glasgow, a royal mayor of Glasgow. And his father was John Anderson. That brings us back to 1611. That's the one Anderson branch of the family that I found that ended up in Jackson that intertwined with the Castlers. The people I want to do are the Tiltons, though. Catherine Wardell, who was Mary Castler's daughter-in-law, married to Ding. Her father was Thomas Tilton Wardell. His mother was Catherine Tilton. As I said in the last chapter, Catherine Tilton was from Cedar Bridge, which is not the Cedar Bridge down in Stafford Township. It's Cedar Bridge was a neighborhood in Bricktown. And Catherine Tilton was a tall woman like my grandmother, and my grandmother was named after her, though my grandmother was spelled with a K, and Catherine was spelled with a C. My grandmother sort of looks like her too. Although I never saw my grandmother at that young an age. Excuse me. Catherine Stilton's. Now, the Allen family and Captain Samuel Allen show up a couple of places in the tree, and my Aunt Marie often talked about the Allens, and I wasn't sure how they fit in, but the Allens fit in as the mother of Aunt Marie, and my grandmother's grandmother, Catherine Tilton. Her father was James Tilton. His father was Thomas Tilton. His father was John Tilton. Now notice here, his father was Elizabeth Gifford. Sorry, his mother was Elizabeth Gifford. I've been doing this too long today. And that brings us to William Gifford, Ananiah Gifford, and Elizabeth Wardell. So my grandmother's grandmother and my grandmother's grandfather were both descended from Eliakim Wardell, Elizabeth Wardell's father. Cousins. As is my mother, through the Giffords, a Burge descended from Eliakim Wardell and Ananiah Gifford. Thomas Tilton, John Tilton. That brings us 1612. He was born in England. William Tilton, Robert Tilton. I'm just going to go back. Robert Tilton, William Tilton. William Tilton, we're now pre-Columbus, 1450. Thomas John Tilton, and John Tilton, born in 1400. This could be fleshed out a little bit, but the Tilton family has been documented back to pre-Columbian times. They came to New England and then south to New Jersey. Several branches of the family, at least two, come through the Tiltons and the Terrys. Lydia Allen, Catherine's mother. Her father was William Allen. Her grandfather, on her mother's side, both her mother and her father were Allens. They were probably cousins. Samuel and James might have been brothers. I go back to David. He seems to be as far back as I get the Allens there. That's the Tiltons. Israel Hofmeyr was a German immigrant. His father was born in Germany, died in America, but he was born in Germany. Israel married Mary Jane Hires. They had Lulu Hofmeyr, who was my grandmother, is my great-grandmother, my grandmother's mother. Mary Jane Hires her family I get back to about the 1600s. But if you notice here, a couple of things happen. They start coming up with the Dutch. These people are New Amsterdam Dutch. The Peters, Visser, Bloom. The Van Dyke. Another interesting one is the Baldwins. John Baldwin, Stephen Baldwin, Ezra Baldwin, Nathan Baldwin, Jonathan Baldwin, Joseph Baldwin. These Baldwins are the Long Island Baldwin family that Alec Baldwin is from. And this branch actually lived in Newark, came over to Newark. And they go back to Sylvester Baldwin and Sylvester's son, who founded Hartford, Connecticut. We've already done Johnny Burge, Mary Reynolds, many people doing this family, Comptons and all. When they come to the West, they think it's Lord Delaware's family. Well, it probably is his family, Lord Delaware's family, but it's not Lord Delaware. Lord Delaware's son, Thomas, died in Virginia, killed by the Powhatan Indians. He didn't live in New Jersey. These all lived in New Jersey, these Wests. And they probably were cousins of the Delaware Wests, but often they'll try and squeeze Lord Delaware in as this Thomas West or that William West. It's not. They were cousins at best. But they may have had some association with the West, because the Wardells seem to have some association with the West. This is an interesting James Kenton Radford. He was born in 1840 in England. He died in North Bergen, Hudson County. He came over here as a young man, enlisted in the army, and fought in the Civil War. His father was David Radford. His father was Thomas Radford. Another Thomas and another John. And then I'm in England, and it's so hard to find anything then. His mother was Mary Edlin, Frances Mary Edlin, and that's John Edlin and Charles Edwin and Edward Edlin. And I think it goes a little bit further. William Edlin, Samuel Edwin, and then Samuel Edwin brings me back to around 1600, and that's as far as I can go with them so far. When you're not dealing with royalty, you start getting back into the 1600s, you lose the wives' maiden names, and people start to disappear because they just didn't keep records for the common people back then. Mary Day, well, by the way, I haven't done, Rufus's wife was Mary Radford. That's my mother's grandmother. She was a very thin, she was a seamstress. She outlived her husband. No, her husband outlived, sorry. Rufus lived, she died young, 1935. Rufus lived till 1951, just before I was born. Mary Radford's, James K. Radford's wife was Mary Day. and I'm lucky to get back. These are in England. She came over. She's an immigrant. You know, in the Victorian age, she came over. Her mother was Elizabeth Innes. And Hawthorne is interesting, but I haven't been able to connect it to the Haythorne family and Puritans. But it's much later, and these were in England. England, because she was the immigrant. This one, these people lived in England. I did the Comptons briefly to get to the Applegates under my mother. And the Comptons are interesting. They're an old Jersey family. And, this one's in England, but this one came over through New England to America, to New Jersey. They lived in by Keyport there where the Raritan River empties into the Great Bay. They lived in Belford. Fishermen they were mainly, but farmers. Annie Bennett, John Compton's wife, my great-great-grandmother, my mother's great-grandmother. The Bennetts are interesting here because we come back to Herberts, another branch of the Herbert family, and Hyers. We saw Hyers here, Mary Jane Hyers. Talked about the Veerings as veterans of the war. Francis was a drummer boy, and his father was a 40-year-old private, born in Bavaria. His father is buried in Bavaria. He never came to America. His mother was German also. These are Germans. And the last of the great-great-grandparents is an Irons. A couple of things to notice in the Irons. Here's Sam Wardell and Sarah Arney again. One of their children, Solomon Wardell, had another Sam who married an Alice Warden, who had Sarah Ann Wardell, who had Annie Irons. Gilbert C. Irons was James Longstreet Irons. Notice the Longstreets again, the same family from Homedale, the Langestrasse, who go back to the same stuff. These are the General James D. Longstreet, James T. Longstreet, Pete Longstreet's family. All right, talking too much. And Anna Bailey. Get right back to New England here, and then back to England. These all go back too. 1590. 1508. We'll look at some of these families later. There are more important things to look at first, but notice the West family again. Again, this could be the Delaware. Could be a Delaware. The West family were the Lord Delaware. Okay. The Irons. They're an old Toms River family. And they go way back. James Longstreet, James Jeremiah, 1711, James Jeremiah Sr., Samuel Irons, Matthew Irons, 1615 he was born, so he was born in England. And then we get to John Irons, who lived in England, didn't come here. So we trace the Irons family back to England, and they are related not only to the Applegates. We saw Irons up there under the Applegates, but they're also related to the Burges. That's my great-great-grandparents. Just to go over my great-grandparents, I've talked about Amos. I've talked about Mary Kastler now. Jacob Kastler seemed to be German, since you get back far enough and it's Peter Ketzler. Thomas Tilton Wardell. The Wardells we did pretty thoroughly. Lulu Hoffmeyer is Catherine's mother from Tom's River. Rufus Burge we've done. Mary Radford was the daughter of the Englishman. Harry Compton was my mother's grandfather. He died in 1919. He had tuberculosis. He died before his father. His father, I think, died in he died in 1918, so he only outlived his father by a year. He was married to Mary Veering. I remember Grandma Veering. We call her Grandma Hurley because she remarried a man named Hurley. The Veerings lived along. They were all 100. She was 96 when she died, and I think he was 99. My grandmother was 80 something. My mother is 92 right now. So this branch of the family lives a long time. The Comptons. Okay, that's my great grandparents, and I've run through just at least a quick run through of all my great great grandparents. I want to take a look at next chapter. I want to get to some of the real meat. These were all average normal people that did straight. I mean, they came from Germany and fought in the Civil War. They lived interesting lives. But I want to follow the Burges back through Joseph, Jonathan, Joseph to Sarah Morris. The next chapter I'm going to do is going to be taking a look at the amazing family history of Sarah Morris. Okay? That'll be chapter 5. And that'll be the good one.